California's largest retailer is suddenly shuttering stores across the state. 6 locations have already closed their doors for good, and rumors of hundreds more closures are spreading through communities from the Central Valley to the coast. Walmart blames soaring operational costs and mounting regulatory pressure, leaving entire towns bracing for vanished jobs and empty shelves. But beneath the headlines, the true story is far more complicated and more alarming than most people realize. I'm Elizabeth Davis, and this is Elizabeth Davis. Before we dive into this investigation, I need to ask you for your support. If you find this reporting valuable, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And when we're done here, leave a comment below with your thoughts. This story affects millions of Americans, and your voice matters. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what is really happening to one of America's most essential retailers. Now let's examine how the backbone of so many communities became California's breaking point. Across California, Walmart's presence is impossible to ignore. Nearly 320 stores stretch from the Central Valley's farming towns to dense urban neighborhoods. Each one functions as a critical lifeline for its community. In rural places like Delano or Hanford, the local Walmart is not simply a place to shop. It is one of the largest employers in town. A single supercenter can support up to 300 jobs, providing steady paychecks that cover rent, groceries, and gas for families who have few other options. The financial connections run even deeper than most people realize. City budgets in smaller towns often depend heavily on the sales tax generated by just one big box retailer. In Delano, for example, nearly 20% of the city's retail sales tax revenue can be traced directly back to Walmart's cash registers. That money pays for essential services like police overtime, library operating hours, and critical road repairs. Remove that store and the city faces a sudden budget gap, sometimes exceeding $1 million per year, that cannot easily be filled through other means. Urban neighborhoods experience the impact differently, but no less severely. In South Los Angeles, a Walmart neighborhood market means affordable groceries and accessible pharmacy services for thousands of residents living in areas often described as food deserts. The loss of a single location can ripple through the entire local economy, pushing up prices at smaller independent stores and forcing residents to travel significantly farther just to access basic necessities. When you add it all together, tens of thousands of Californians depend on Walmart for steady employment, while hundreds of local governments count on the company's sales tax contributions to fund essential public services. When a retailer operating at this massive scale faces serious trouble, the impact is not limited to empty store shelves. It threatens the entire financial foundation of communities that have built their budgets and their futures around this retail presence. The shockwaves extend far beyond what most people see when they drive past a closed storefront. We are talking about families losing income, cities losing revenue, and entire regions losing access to affordable goods. This is not just a business story. This is a story about the survival of communities that depend on a fragile economic model, and that model is now showing serious cracks. 6 Walmart stores in California have permanently closed their doors within just the past 18 months. The closures came in waves, each one sending shockwaves through its local community. In San Diego, shoppers arriving at the Imperial Avenue location on February 9th found the doors locked for good with no warning. That same day, the El Cajon store on Fletcher Parkway posted closure signs citing a failed lease negotiation as the reason for the sudden shutdown. By late March, the West Covina Supercenter joined the growing list, with management pointing to persistent underperformance as the primary cause. Granite Bay in Northern California lost its Walmart store in April, leaving residents scrambling for alternatives. Fremont's Albray Street location shut down in May, adding another community to the list of those affected. One additional closure, not widely publicized in mainstream media, brings the confirmed total to 6 locations. Each one represents a significant blow to the local workforce and economy. Altogether, these closures resulted in 530 employees receiving official separation notices. Their jobs disappeared overnight. In each individual case, Walmart cited either financial performance issues or unresolved lease disputes as the stated reason. There was no single sweeping cause announced, but the emerging pattern is becoming increasingly hard to ignore, especially in the Central Valley and similar regions where retail options were already thin before these closures began. Analysts who have been tracking the Tuileries to Merced corridor have warned for months that these areas are particularly vulnerable to retail disruption. When a Walmart disappears from one of these towns, the ripple effect is immediate and devastating. Grocery shelves go empty, pharmacy counters close permanently, and steady paychecks vanish overnight for hundreds of workers. Local investigative reports reveal that in some of these towns, Walmart was one of the only stable employers offering full-time work with benefits. Without it, displaced workers are forced to scramble for new jobs in local economies that were already fragile before the closures. Meanwhile, city leaders brace themselves for the inevitable loss of critical sales tax revenue that funded basic services. These are not merely numbers on a government spreadsheet. Each closure leaves behind empty buildings, lost wages, and families who are suddenly unsure how they will make ends meet in the coming months. Labor costs in California set a uniquely high bar for any retailer attempting to operate profitably. The state minimum wage currently stands at $16 per hour, and in certain cities and specific industries, that baseline climbs as high as $20 per hour. Walmart's entry-level pay typically hovers just above the legal minimum requirement. But mandatory benefits, paid sick leave policies, and strict overtime rules add multiple layers of expense that simply do not exist in many other states across the country. Scheduling requirements and mandated break periods unique to California's labor code further complicate store operations and drive up payroll management costs. Environmental standards add yet another tier of regulatory complexity and expense. Title 24 dictates strict energy efficiency standards for lighting systems, refrigeration units, and heating and cooling systems, requiring costly equipment upgrades and ongoing compliance monitoring checks. Senate Bill 1383 specifically targets food waste reduction. It forces stores to completely overhaul their disposal systems, track organic waste separately, and pay for specialized hauling services. These environmental mandates are certainly designed with good intentions to protect the environment. But for a retailer operating hundreds of locations across the state, the cumulative financial cost becomes substantial and difficult to absorb. The permitting process presents its own set of challenges. On average, a new Walmart store in California faces a permitting process lasting anywhere from 24 to 36 months. These delays are often tangled up in lengthy environmental impact reviews and local zoning appeals that drag on for years. Each month of delay means lost potential revenue, while commercial rent and property holding costs continue to pile up relentlessly. Commercial real estate rents in California rank among the highest in the entire country, especially in urban markets and coastal areas, squeezing profit margins thin even before the first customer walks through the front door on opening day. Logistics challenges create real operational headaches. Assembly Bill 5 reclassified thousands of independent truck drivers as employees rather than contractors, dramatically driving up transportation costs for retailers who depend on flexible shipping networks and just-in-time inventory deliveries. Industry estimates suggest that between 15,000 and 20,000 truckers either left the California market entirely or shifted to different roles, significantly tightening the supply chain and raising shipping rates by as much as 5 to 8% almost overnight. These costs accumulate rapidly. When you add together all of these regulatory layers, they can push the total cost of doing business in California 20 to 30% higher than operating in states like Texas or Florida. For a company like Walmart, which already operates on notoriously thin profit margins in the retail industry, these numbers are not just a minor nuisance or inconvenience. They represent a serious warning sign that the business model may no longer be sustainable in this state. California's business climate has transformed into a battleground for some of the country's largest and most recognizable companies. For big retailers like Walmart, the cost of keeping stores open in California is not simply higher than other states. It exists in an entirely different financial league. Recent comprehensive studies estimate that operating a big box retail store in California costs 20 to 30% more than running an identical operation in Texas or Florida. That cost premium does not come only from higher wages or expensive rent. Legal liability represents a constant threat. Retailers are required to set aside millions of dollars in reserve funds for potential lawsuits involving consumer protection claims, accessibility compliance issues, or labor disputes. According to a 2024 liability reserve analysis, California-based retailers dedicate nearly double the average legal budget compared to their counterparts operating in other states. This hostile business environment has already pushed some of America's most iconic corporate names to pack up operations and leave. Oracle relocated its headquarters to Austin, Texas in late 2020. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise followed suit, shifting its home base from Silicon Valley to Houston in 2021. Financial giant Charles Schwab moved to Texas that same year. Tesla's headquarters now sits in Austin after Elon Musk publicly expressed frustration with California's regulatory environment. In the energy sector, Chevron announced its move from San Ramon to Houston in 2024, while Phillips 66 and Valero began closing refineries that had operated for generations, citing mounting costs of environmental compliance as the reason. In Tulare, the closure of a single big box retailer means far more than just empty shelves and inconvenience. For families living on the outskirts of town, the nearest shopping alternative can mean a 35-mile drive each way. That becomes an impossible trip for households without reliable transportation. Seniors and disabled residents who were once able to walk or catch a short ride for groceries and prescription medications now find themselves effectively stranded. In Bakersfield, a local supplier who once stocked Walmart shelves with products describes watching his orders drop to zero practically overnight, forcing him to cut his workforce in half just to survive. City Hall officials in Hanford stare at budget spreadsheets showing a $1.8 million hole in the annual municipal budget, a massive gap that can only be filled by either slashing essential public services or raising local taxes on struggling residents. On the urban coast, a single mother in South Los Angeles carefully weighs the financial cost of 2 bus rides and several hours of lost time in transit just to buy affordable groceries for her children. In Imperial Valley, the closure of a Walmart pharmacy leaves elderly residents on fixed incomes facing a harsh new reality. For many seniors, the nearest alternative pharmacy is now a 40-mile drive, an impossible distance for those without transportation. Union leaders from United Food and Commercial Workers Local 5 argue that stronger worker protections remain non-negotiable. They insist that we cannot allow corporate threats to dictate the labor standards our communities deserve. But on the sales floor, the mood tells a very different story. A longtime cashier, her voice wavering with uncertainty, admits that most of us would rather have a job with decent pay than no job at all. The divide between policy and reality has become stark and undeniable. Policies designed with good intentions to protect workers and consumers now threaten to leave the most vulnerable residents with nothing at all. Today, fears of a mass Walmart exodus from California reflect deep public anxieties about disappearing jobs and vanishing access to essential goods. But the facts show only a handful of actual closures so far, reminding us how quickly narrative and fear can eclipse measurable reality. In an era increasingly shaped by perception and social media, what we believe often matters more than what is objectively true. This is Elizabeth Davis. If this investigation opened your eyes, subscribe to Elizabeth Davis right now. Hit that notification bell. Leave a comment below telling me what you think is really driving these closures. And share this video with everyone who needs to understand what is happening. The question remains unanswered and deeply unsettling. How many more closures will it take before we admit the model is broken?